Alright, today I'm going to be cleaning and rebuilding a carburetor on a 2000 Honda 1100. This is obviously a V-twin motor. We're going to do several videos on this 1100. I just wanted to do a quick clean and rebuild on one of these carburetors so you could see how this assembly works. We obviously have the carburetor off of the motorcycle at this time. I can show you a separate video on how to remove that carburetor, but I left the choke cables hooked up at this point so you could see what they look like. Take a 10 millimeter, and I suggest using a wrench on these. You can use pliers, but this is just a plastic cap, and if you twist this the wrong way or it's a little stuck coming apart there, you could damage this plastic cap and you'd have to end up replacing this cap. So we've got the plunger here, we've got a spring, we've got the cable that runs through this cap. So to remove the plunger off of here, what I do, and you don't have to if all you're doing is cleaning the carburetor, you don't actually have to remove this plunger, but this would just be if you're replacing the plunger or replacing the cable. I like to take my two fingers here, the thumb and the pointer finger, kind of pull that spring back, and then I pinch that cable and then just slide that plunger off the side there. You can see it's grooved, allowing that cable to come off there. Pull the spring and this cap too can come off as well. So same thing on the other side. Grab a 10 millimeter. I've already loosened up this other side just to kind of speed this up and get this out of the way. But same thing here, and I'm not going to take this plunger off, but I just spun this cap off of there. Plunger's going to stay on there, and we'll leave that all together like that. Both these carburetors inside, the diaphragms, the needles, the seats, everything is going to look identical, and in fact a lot of these parts are interchangeable except for a handful of exterior parts on these carburetors. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pull let's say this carburetor apart here. We've got our bowl here, we've got a drain screw here. It's a flat screwdriver. You don't actually have to pull this all the way out to drain this fuel. If you do a couple turns out, fuel is going to start coming out this bottom nipple here. That's why it's important to have a vent line or a drain line hooked up to this when it's sitting on the motorcycle. That way that fuel, if that motorcycle's bouncing around in the trailer or in the shop or whatever, that way that fuel isn't just dripping directly on top of that motor, causing some discoloration on the motor, potentially a fire if the motorcycle's hot. So if the fuel is constantly dripping and you just can't get it to quit dripping, I would suggest going in and adjusting the needle and seat or replacing that, and I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. So again, if that carburetor, if you're draining fuel out for the year, if you got bad fuel in there, I'd suggest pulling this bottom bowl off and cleaning this carburetor really good, but if all you're wanting to do is drain that fuel, this is a good way of doing that. So tighten that back up there. I'm going to pull these bottom 4 screws off here, this bottom bowl. These sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge to be removed if the person before you over tightened them. If that's the case, you can grab a small pair of vice grips and go ahead and loosen it like that. At that point, I would suggest replacing that screw, otherwise you're going to have that problem the next time. So all 4 screws are off now. Sometimes these will stick a little bit if you're pulling it apart for the first time in a long time. Just take your screwdriver there, tap on it, and that'll allow you to pull that bottom bowl off there. Make sure this is clean, no debris sitting in here. If there is, take carbon choke cleaner, spray it out really good, take compressed air, clean it out really well. You will want to replace this O-ring if you ordered a carb rebuild kit. Replace this O-ring. A lot of times these get weathered just from the heating and cooling, and then just fuel running through there can discolor that, dry rot that, and start leaking out there. We've got 2 jets in here. We've got our main jet here, and then we've got our pilot jet here. A little bit of an unusual style. These jets are common. They're a very common jet for motorcycles and ATVs. But the way that typically a lot of times these main jets, straight up from those main jets will be your needle and your diaphragm here with your slide. That's not the case here. This time that needle runs straight through your carburetor. I'll show you this angle. Straight through that carburetor and actually goes into this port here. Our main jet here is allowing fuel to be pulled up from this bottom float bowl area and pulled up through this main jet, and will run up into this line here. If throttle's wide open, your needle's going to be clear up like that. I'll show you this angle here. throttle wide open, your airflow is going to be coming through here. It's going to open that slide. It's really hard for you to see that. Maybe you can see it there. Slide's going to be clear up. Your needle's going to be up. You see that there. And then that fuel is going to be sucked up through that needle area there. So it's important to have the correct size main jet in here, correct size needle, and I'll show you how to remove that later on. So we've got our our main jet here, and sometimes when you pull this main jet, your main jet holder will come out as well. There's your main jet there, and there is small engraving either on the top or on the side of these main jets. Will tell you what size it is. I believe this is a 170 main jet, which is very, very large. If you hold this jet up to light, you can see through it pretty easily. Take carbon choke cleaner, blow through there. Take compressed air, blow through there. Just make sure it's really clean. Don't want any kind of debris or buildup in there. Next is your pilot jet, and if your motorcycle's having a hard time starting, 9 times out of 10 it's this pilot jet. These pilot jets get gummed up and plugged because they are such a small orifice through the middle of this pilot jet. So again, take compressed air, blow through that. Take carbon choke cleaner. You can blow through it. You can spray about anywhere to get that fluid through there. Again, you just want to make sure that you can see through it. They make tools that go through and clean these ports out. You can use one of those. It's just important that you can see completely through that pilot jet. The pilot jet, again, important. Make sure it's cleaned out or you're going to have issues with it starting. Sometimes this carburetor will have a good cleaned out pilot jet. This side won't. If that's the case, and you're relying on this cylinder to start your motorcycle, and that's not good either. So this is your float here. Again, this is an adjustable float, so it's an adjustable needle. There's a metal tab there that can be pushed down or up depending on if you need more fuel, less fuel. I don't suggest adjusting that if you're having an issue with it running right. 9 times out of 10, I would replace this needle and seat here because you don't want to let your bike run lean or rich if adjusting your needle and seat is not what needs to happen. So again, I like to just replace that needle and seat as opposed to adjusting this. But it does happen to where you need to adjust this float height as well. So there's your needle there. It just slides right off this metal tab here that's on your float. And inspect this rubber tip is most common where there's issues. It'll get grooved. Sometimes there'll be debris sitting down in there. Maybe it'll be lodged in that rubber there. Sometimes that rubber is just completely missing. So make sure that is in good condition before going back together. And you want to clean through this port here. Your fuel comes in from your fuel tank, and this nipple here will flow up through here, dump into here. I'm going to pull this seat. It's a 10 millimeter. That might be easy. It's a 10 millimeter, and it is replaceable. And I suggest doing that if your carb kit comes with a seat, then definitely replace it. You've got a screen here. Should help keep any kind of debris that's in your fuel tank from flowing down into your carburetor, which that's a nice piece about these. The downside of this is these get plugged up. You've got to pull this carburetor to clean it up. So you've got a spacer on there or a washer on there. Make sure that goes on there. Again, make sure you can blow through this with compressed air. That fuel should come out this nipple here, which is directly from that fuel tank or that fuel petcock. So screw that back in there. They do make different sizes of these as well. I'd go back with the factory one. Replacing your needle and seat is not going to add horsepower like, say, adding exhaust and then changing out your main jet is going to do. That's not going to be the case with your needle and seat here. So don't think by ordering a larger size of these or boring out that orifice there that you're gaining power. So float back on there now. This needle, doesn't matter which direction it goes, that wire's right in the center there. Slide that back on there. Slide it all the way down. Make sure that's seated properly. Grab your pin there, run it through there. Make sure there's no cracks or any kind of damage on this float here. If there is, make sure and replace that. Put your main jet back in there. Like I said earlier, you can pull out this pilot or this main jet holder as well. It's just a little bit longer, ½ inch or so, that runs down into this this area here. So it can come out, you can blow through that, but your pilot or your main jet is definitely what will need cleaned out because it is a smaller orifice than your main jet holder. So tighten that on there. I don't like to use a screwdriver that's too small. If you use a screwdriver that's got too small of a head on there, if you put it in there and turn it to tighten it up, what you're gonna do is turn right in the middle of that jet there and damage that jet. This one's a little bit different. It's a little bit smaller jet. You can use a smaller screwdriver, but I still like using the larger ones just to get that cleaned out, or just to get that securely tightened. So snug it up. You don't have to tighten them extremely tight because they are brass jets going into a aluminum carburetor. Again, inspect this, make sure there's no debris, dirt, anything down in there. And then go ahead and put these back on. Again, don't have to be super tight. And there you go. A little test for your diaphragm area. Grab compressed air, blow into this port here, but I would not suggest sticking your nozzle down in there. I would just blow through there. If you can see that there, when you blow through that port there, your needle and your slide will raise up and down. That's important to check that. Make sure that nothing's holding this slide. Make sure it's not catching. Make sure it's going down properly. So same thing on this carburetor. You've got this port here that you want to blow through. Make sure that that's going up and down. Now we've got this top cap here that we're going to pull off here. Inspect the diaphragm. I'm going to show you how to replace that needle. 4 Phillips screws on this one as well. These are a little bit shorter than your bowl screws, so if for whatever reason got them mixed up, these are going to be shorter. I like to take and put my thumb on this cap. There is a spring underneath here. It's got some tension on it. It's not going to blow your hand off of this carburetor or anything, but I like to keep my hand on there just to kind of keep all parts together. You've got a screw loose, and that cap pops off of there. Screw could go just fall on the floor or something. So pull that cap off of there. You've got your tab there, your area that you want to make sure is lined up with that tab there. Got our spring that just sits in there like that. Doesn't matter which direction that goes in first. And then we've got our diaphragm here. It's fairly common for these to get ripped, get them weathered, get them torn, and you want to replace those if that's the case. When you're pushing up, I like to take my finger there, put it underneath the slide, push it up out of there like that. You want to make sure that this is all clean, no debris. Fuel doesn't go up into this area here, so most of the time this doesn't get gummed up. It would just be if water was able to get in there somehow by this not sealing properly. So make sure that that's clean, make sure those orifices are cleaned out. You can blow through there with compressed air if need be. Your diaphragm here with your slide and your needle here, make sure that needle's cleaned off, make sure that looks really good. You've got a plastic cap underneath there, and I like to take that and do about 1/8 of a turn. That cap will pop off of there, and then I like to grab small pliers here and pull this out. You could dump it out. If you dump it out, I would make sure you hang on to your needle, tip it up like this. If you don't, your needle's gonna fall off, your washer's gonna fall off, and hopefully it doesn't roll away from you. So at that point, you can take and push up with your other finger, your needle there. This needle is replaceable. It's not adjustable. There's your needle there. It does have a small washer on here, a small spacer. There's a size written on this needle here, and that's if you're doing custom work to your bike, exhaust, intake, stuff like that, they may suggest you replacing these parts. So that is how you do that. I take then, and you can either tip this upside down, but you don't want to let that spacer or that washer fall off of there when you're putting this back together. Stick that down in the groove there, slide it down all the way. Next, I take, and this got a spring on here. I'll show you how to check that here in a little bit, but you want to make sure that doesn't, it can come off of there. You got to pull it off of there. So you drop that down. This time it flipped over the wrong way. Did it again. You just take the top of that, slide that down there, put that into place. I actually turn it with my pliers there so you can see it's not a very difficult turn, you can take this needle, press on at the end of your finger there, it'll be spring loaded. If it's not spring loaded or it doesn't move at all, take that cap off of the end, you got that needle or that spring turned sideways. So I like fold that down like a mushroom there. I take that carburetor, again, make sure that this groove is lined up with that space there. Stick your finger through here. Make sure that that needle slides down into your needle jet or your main jet holder there, right in the center of that. Again, making sure that this is folded down. I set that into place there. I keep my finger underneath there. If you don't, what happens is you push down like that, and that, I'll turn it there so you can see, that diaphragm turns up like that. So if you're able to keep it pushed down like that, it'll kind of sit into place, fall into exactly where it needs to be. Spring goes on there. And again, making sure that goes on the right direction. And then make sure that diaphragm there sits in the place there. That's what seals it up. So spring, make sure it sits down in there the right way. And then a lot of times you can kind of feel it fall into place. If that's the case, you can take your finger off the diaphragm, but I would put pressure down on there. If you take this off, obviously that cap's gonna lose pressure, fall off the place there. That slide's gonna drop down, or that diaphragm's gonna drop down out of place there. So take these Phillips screws, run them in there. Phillips screwdriver, I like to get 2 or 3 snugged up before I take my finger off the top of this cap here. One of the reasons why I like these carburetors, you can replace these individually. Sometimes they machine them together or are not able to replace them individually. So the way you do that is on this side there's 2 screws. Well, there's 1 screw here. Let's see, where's the other one? And then 1 screw on this side. You can loosen these up and split these carburetors here. And here's the other place, right where your throttle cables or your throttle butterflies are attached. So here's where your throttle cables are hooked up here. It runs from this area here. You can see when we turn that throttle that those butterflies are opened up, allowing more air and fuel allowing more air to flow through there, and is sucking more fuel up. So this is how you adjust your idle right here. No, excuse me. This is how you adjust your idle. This is how you sync your carburetor so they're both running on the same frequency. This is your idle adjust here. Clockwise, going to turn that idle up. What that's doing is turning your butterfly there, opening this. It's not going to be this much, but if you do a bunch of turns, it's going to open it just like that. Obviously idling way too high. So you only want to do these couple half turn at a time, if that, and only when the bike is completely warmed up. We got a couple lines running through here. These are just vent lines and airflow. So you want to make sure that they've got good O-rings. If you sense a fuel leak, or excuse me, an air leak, could potentially be some of these lines here that are like that. You got your drain on this one. There's your drain on this one. Trying to think what else I wanted to go over here on these. Air fuel screw down here. Takes a small screwdriver. It's a flat screwdriver. You can go, and this one is determined by the turns out. So if you see in your book or you read online, your air fuel screw needs to be 2 turns out. What that is you turn it all the way in, and then you turn it out the number of turns that your manual says. So in this case, I'm gonna count them going in. We've got half, 1 and a half, 2 and a half, 3 turns out. So that is where it was set, not saying that's where it needs to be. And then you can take and do the same. So now it's screwed all the way in. Half, 1, half, 2 and a half, 3. I'm not totally sure where yours needs to be at for your riding conditions, but check your manual, check if you've got different aftermarket exhaust. A lot of times their websites will say, or their installation instructions will say how many turns out your air fuel screw needs to be. This carburetor has it on this side. Don't get it confused with your drain plug there. Those do need to be tight. These don't need to be, these aren't going to be completely seated down. So that is carburetors on a Honda 1100 cc V-twin motorcycle. Thanks for watching. If you have questions or comments, make sure and leave those below. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe. There's a button down at the bottom of the screen. You can just click subscribe and you'll see a lot more videos of this same machine. Thanks for watching.